This walk passes many of London's famous attractions, as well as a host of lesser known places. There's a link to a map of the route below this video. It starts at Buckingham Palace, official home of the Queen of England, where the changing of the guard ceremony is a major attraction. To the left of the facade along Buckingham Palace Road, the Royal Mews and Queen's Gallery are also popular. The nearest underground station is Green Park. Leave Buckingham Palace along the Mall, the route used by visiting foreign dignitaries when meeting the Queen. To the left, sentries guard gated Clarence House, where several members of the royal family reside. Then just past the first junction, Queen Mary's commemoration plaque is set into the wall of Marlborough House where she once lived. Her husband was King George V. Past the statues of King George VI, his wife Elizabeth, and the facade of the Royal Society building. Before reaching Admiralty Arch, turn right by the shrewdly camouflaged Admiralty Citadel towards Guards Parade. About 50 metres further on, near the statue of Clive, the once top-secret Churchill War Rooms have now become a popular tourist attraction. At the end of Horse Guards Road, go left towards Parliament Square, inhabited by several statues including Abraham Lincoln, Nelson Mandela, Mahatma Gandhi and Winston Churchill, and surrounded by 1,000 years of history. The clock tower, officially called the Elizabeth Tower but more commonly known as Big Ben, seems to dominate. At the opposite end of the building, the monarch enters for the traditional opening of Parliament through the appropriately named Sovereign's Entrance, which is situated below the Victoria Tower. Suffragette leader Emmeline Pankhurst features in the nearby Victoria Tower Gardens, while the imaginatively named knife-edged two-piece by Henry Moore is located just across the road. Beyond the sunken 14th century dual tower, thought to have been built to house the valuables of King Edward III, King George V, cloaked in white, faces the Houses of Parliament. Nearby St Margaret's Church has a reasonable history. Sir Walter Raleigh, William Caxton and John Milton are buried there. Samuel Pepys and Winston Churchill are both married there. It's actually located within the grounds of Westminster Abbey, one of London's foremost tourist attractions, where since Christmas Day 1066, all of England's monarchs bar two have been crowned. Past the Westminster Scholars' War Memorial and Dean's Yard building, on the way to the Central Methodist Hall, where the very first meeting of the United Nations took place, before returning past the Supreme Court to Parliament Square. Head along Whitehall past the cenotaph, designed by Edwin Lutyens, who is now at rest in the crypt of St Paul's Cathedral, to gated and guarded Downing Street, where the Prime Minister's official residence is at number 10. Arguably more interesting than the statues of military leaders and other notables along the way, the guards mounted on their horses present a popular photo opportunity. Be aware though that getting too close carries the risk of being kicked or bitten. The 2 on the clock above the Horse Guards is blackened because that was the time on the 30th of January 1649 when King Charles I was beheaded on scaffolding outside the banqueting hall opposite. There's a statue of him on horseback and still connected to his head where Whitehall enters Trafalgar Square. Dominant is Nelson's Column, erected more than 40 long years after the Battle of Trafalgar took place. Next to Admiralty Arch, the ceremonial entrance to the Mall and Buckingham Palace, Canada House enjoys a prime location, as does the South African High Commission, located directly opposite. At the back of the square, beyond the fountains and lions, the popular National Gallery is world class, while over on the corner, St Martin's in the Fields, Parish Church of Buckingham Palace, has a reasonably priced and atmospheric cafe down in the crypt, with an imaginatively stocked gift shop close by. Visitors to the National Gallery quite often attend the free lunchtime recitals there, if only to give respite to weary feet. In fairness, it should be said, the musicians are actually of a very high standard indeed. Candlelit evening concerts are also very well attended, though a tad more expensive. It will presumably be an elementary decision for fans of fictional detective Sherlock Holmes to visit the theme pub of the same name, a short distance from Trafalgar Square, along nearby Northumberland Street. Afterwards return to the Strand, where Charing Cross is situated in the forecourt of Charing Cross Station. It's not the original, It doesn't look like the original, and the original was located where King Charles I statue now stands, but it is Charing Cross. Continue along the Strand where on the left-hand side, Stanley Gibbons claims to be the world's largest stamp shop. Maybe interesting and maybe not, opposite down the steps about 25 metres along Carting Lane is a gas lamp permanently lit by gas from the sewers. Moving on up, the next road leads to the Savoy Hotel. It's the only road in the United Kingdom where cars drive on the right-hand side. A little further on, the Courtauld Art Gallery, home to several masterpieces, is located at the entrance of Somerset House. St Mary le Strand Church occupies a traffic island opposite King's College, producer of many important and influential alumni, including Florence Nightingale, Virginia Woolf, Joseph Lister and Desmond Tutu. Next, the Australian High Commission, once featured in a Harry Potter film, lies just across the road from St Clement Danes Church, which at certain times of the day chimes out its signature nursery rhyme, Oranges and Lemons. The Gothically styled Royal Courts of Justice can be visited. The security is understandably tight. It's a good idea to gen up on protocol before troubling the staff there. Opposite, the first ever premises of world famous tea company Twinings houses a small museum and shop. In the middle of the road by historic Charlton Coves Bank, the Temple Bar Memorial replaced the old city gate in the late 19th century. Then across from Chancery Lane and below Prince Henry's Room, one of the very few buildings in London to predate the Great Fire of 1666, there's a gate through which it's quite often possible to sneak into the grounds of the Inner and Middle Temples to visit the 12th century church originally constructed by the secretive Knights Templar. Shortly afterwards, Ford's Bank is the fourth oldest in the world. The clock of St Dunstan in the west opposite was the first public clock in London to possess a minute hand. Giants come out to chime the time every 15 minutes. A statue of Queen Elizabeth I is set back from the road at first floor level. The building next door is rumoured to be where murderer Sweeney Todd once ran his barber shop, and next door to that is the London base of D.C. Thompson, publisher of the Beano. After crossing Fetter Lane, take the third small alley on the left called Johnson's Court, which snakes to Gough Square, where Dr. Samuel Johnson, compiler of the first serious English dictionary, once lived. Bear right by the statue of his cat, following Hind Court and Wine Office Court past the Old Cheshire Cheese, a public house once frequented by Charles Dickens, on the way back to Fleet Street. Immediately to the left, at first floor level, is a statue of Mary Queen of Scots. The nearby columned Art Deco Telegraph building and predominantly black Daily Express building are a reminder of the time when national newspapers were synonymous with Fleet Street. Across the road behind the Old Bell Tavern, the steeple of St Bride's Church is thought to be the inspiration behind the tiered wedding cake. When crossing Farringdon Road, look left to see the Holborn Viaduct in the distance before climbing Ludgate Hill to St Paul's Cathedral, London's tallest building until 1967. Beside it, the Temple Bar Gate, the memorial is in the centre of Fleet Street by Child's Bank, was eventually relocated to the entrance of Paternoster Square, opposite London Stock Exchange building. From Queen Anne's statue in front of St Paul's Cathedral, cross into Dean's Court, past the Old Deanery, official residence of the Bishop of London, and right into Carter Lane, past the Youth Hostel Association building. About 30 metres further, a covered alley leads to secluded Wardrobe Place, where in centuries gone by, England's monarchs stored their ceremonial robes. Follow the next turning down St Andrew's Hill before entering Island Place, where the Cockpit pub on the corner was formerly a major venue for cockfighting. Past the graves at St Anne's Blackfriars Island Yard, before turning right into Church Entry, then left and left again into Blackfriars Lane. At the end, under the railway bridge, the interior of the Blackfriar pub is worth a visit. In the opposite direction, past St Andrews by the Wardrobe Church, the Church of Scientology, St Benet's Metropolitan Welsh Church, and the College of Arms, which is responsible for all matters heraldic, before following Peter's Hill past the Salvation Army's well-regarded and popular Café 101 towards the Millennium Bridge. As with most of London's bridges, the views are pretty good. Directly ahead, the Tate Modern, a converted power station, has become an exceptionally popular art gallery, while the nearby Globe Theatre specialises in Shakespeare productions. Shakespeare aficionados may wish to take a small detour onto Southwark Bridge and then down the steps diagonally opposite to see the site of the original Globe Theatre. Follow the path alongside the river and under Southwark Bridge towards the Anchor Public House, from where Samuel Pepys watched the Great Fire of London and where Dr. Samuel Johnson was a regular. Slightly away from the river, the road beneath the railway passes Clink Prison, now a museum, and the remains of Winchester Palace, towards a reproduction of the Golden Hind, the surprisingly small vessel in which Sir Francis Drake and his crew circumnavigated the world. From here head inland to Southwark Cathedral, parts of which date from the 12th century. It's not particularly large, nor is it particularly important, but entry is free, although ignoring the donations box may lead to hell and damnation. Adjacent and mostly under railway arches, Borough Market has some interesting stalls, try the fudge, and quite a wide choice of places to eat. The steps at the end of the path behind the cathedral lead to the uninspiring London Bridge. Over the river head for the monument, a memorial built close to where the Great Fire started in 1666. At the bottom of Fish Street Hill, St Agnes the Martyr Church was until 1831 the entry point to London Bridge. Follow the path to the left of the church before turning alongside the river in the direction of Tower Bridge. On the opposite bank, the building with the gap is number 1 London Bridge, which houses several popular entertainment venues. Behind it, adjacent to London Bridge Station, the Shard, a 95-storey high glass-clad pyramid, has an open-air viewing deck on the 72nd floor. At ground level, some buildings along the waterfront are converted warehouses, dating from the time when this stretch of the river was an important and integral part of the Port of London. The warship, HMS Belfast, has been converted into a much-visited floating museum. In the distance, the roundish glass building is City Hall. Walk past former Billingsgate Fish Market, then where the path turns away from the river, continue to the dual carriageway. On the other side, and a little to the left, take St Mary at Hill to where the church of the same name dates from the 14th century. Opposite, follow St Dunstan's Lane to the pleasant gardens of St Dunstan in the east, a church ruined by bombs during the Second World War. Returning to the dual carriageway, pass All Hallows by the Tower, a church established in the year 675, still with a Saxon arch, and where John Quincy Adams, 6th President of the United States of America, was married. The Tower of London, where it's easy to spend half a day engrossed in history, is a short downhill walk away. Detour across the iconic Tower Bridge to enjoy the river views. It opens about 1,000 times each year. The timetable is posted online. On the far bank, Butler's Wharf and Shad Thames, once part of London's Dockland, have been converted into a sought-after residential area, which also houses several well-patronised restaurants. A little way along the river from the Tower of London, just the other side of the approach road to Tower Bridge, the peaceful environs of St Catherine Dock are popular with those seeking somewhere to relax. Back past the tower, close to Tower Hill Underground Station, there are still a few remnants of the ancient city wall first built by the Romans. Then over at Trinity Gardens, it's possible to visit the exact spot on Tower Hill where public executions once took place. Leave along Savage Gardens past the Port of London Authority building, featured in the James Bond movie Skyfall and with a high-rise statue of Old Father Thames, before turning left into Pepys Street to St Olave's Church, where Pepys is buried. Following the back streets, at the top of Seething Lane go left, then right into Mark Lane, and before St Olave's Parish Hall, cut left through Dunster Court, right into Mincing Lane, left along Fenchurch Street to the Walkie Talkie, former winner of the Carbuncle Cup. To experience the view from the top, it's best to book in advance. expect airport-like security. Opposite the walkie, go along Lime Street towards the Lloyd's building, taking time to detour into Leadenhall Market, designed by Horace Jones, who was also the architect of Tower Bridge. Past the Lloyd's building, with its ducks and lifts situated on the outside, St Andrew's Undershaft, built in 1532, is at the corner of St Mary Axe, home to the now famous Gherkins, situated a few metres beyond. Turn left along Leadenhall Street between the Lloyd's building and Leadenhall building, colloquially known as the Cheese Grater, towards Cornhill, where a Sainsbury's local store sells ready-to-eat meals. Opposite the Church of St Peter upon Cornhill is a small garden with seats and what could loosely be described as a picnic lawn. Enter by St Peter's Alley. Similarly, a little further along, enter St Michael's Church Gardens along St Michael's Alley, which also happens to lead to the Georgian Vulture, a drinking establishment once patronised by Charles Dickens and mentioned numerous times in the Pickwick papers. Next along Cornhill enter Ball Court, where London's oldest restaurant, Simpson's Tavern, is well signposted. Eat at ancient underwriting tables long since removed from Lloyd's, on seats which to this day incorporate hat stands specifically designed to accommodate bowlers and toppers. Across Cornhill, the Royal Exchange, opened by Queen Elizabeth I and then after having burned down a couple of times by Queen Victoria, is now a very pleasant coloured courtyard bordered with luxury shops. Just the other side of Threadneedle Street, easy access to the Fortnite Bank of England is restricted to the museum, where visitors are invited to hold a gold bar. Attempts to remove it from the premises are discouraged. Beyond the entrances to Bank Station, the column-fronted Mansion House, official residence of the Lord Mayor of London, hides St Stephen Walbrook Church, the dome of which was designed by Sir Christopher Wren as a tester prior to his masterpiece at St Paul's Cathedral. This is also the church from where Chadvara set up the Samaritans, an organisation which continues to help those with emotional difficulties, saving many lives in the process. Pass by Mansion House along Poultry into Cheapside towards St Mary le Bow Church. It's said that those born within earshot of the sound of its bells can claim to be true Cockneys. 40 metres before the church, turn along King Street towards the Guildhall, administrative and ceremonial centre of the City of London, which also houses a decent art gallery and the remains of a Roman amphitheatre. The weather vane on the spire of nearby St Lawrence Jewry Church is in the form of a gridiron, on account of poor Lawrence being barbecued to death. Leave along Gresham Street, then turn into Wood Street towards the Barbican, passing London's own Leaning Tower, all that remains of St Albans Church after Second World War bombing. Turn left to find remnants of London's ancient city wall on both sides of the road, before taking the elevated walkway to St Giles Cripplegate Church in one direction and the widely praised Museum of London in the other. From the museum, head south before slipping through peaceful Postman's Park, then along King Edward Street towards the rear of London Stock Exchange, before turning by Christchurch Greyfriars Church, yet another victim of Second World War bombs. Just past the Central Criminal Court, better known as the Old Bailey, which like the Royal Courts of Justice can be visited subject to stringent security measures, take the road between St Sepulchre's Church and the supposedly haunted Viaduct Pub towards St Bartholomew's Hospital, the oldest in Britain. Opposite, the Golden Boy of Pye Corner is located where the Great Fire of London eventually burned itself out. Further along, a statue of King Henry VIII stands above an entrance to the hospital, and further still there's a memorial to William Wallace, who was executed nearby as long ago as 1305. The path below the nearby Beam Tudor building leads to St Bartholomew the Great Church, one of London's oldest. Beyond Smithfield Meat Market, extremely active in the early hours when most are sleeping but resembling a morgue at other times, follow Charterhouse Street before turning left into Farringdon Road and climbing the steps onto Holborn Viaduct. Past the City Temple and St Andrew's Church before cutting right to Ely Place, the last privately owned street in London and home to St Etheldreda's Church, which dates from the reign of King Edward I. Close to the entrance of Ely Place, take the narrow passage to Ye Old Mitre pub, a favourite with tourists and associated with Queen Elizabeth I. Continue along the passage to Hatton Garden, famous for jewellery, which is frequently visited by the romantically involved and wishful thinkers. Returning to Holborn past the equestrian statue of Prince Albert, consort of Queen Victoria, then the red brick Prudential building, before crossing towards the timber-framed facade of Staple Inn. Walk through the courtyard if it's open or via Chancery Lane if it isn't, to the Silver Vaults, a subterranean parade of retail outlets predominantly selling silver and worth a visit. Security is understandably tight but largely unobtrusive, with most people being permitted entry. Along Chancery Lane, Eden Ravenscroft, the oldest tailors in London, is the preferred outfitter to many of the judiciary and robe maker to the royal family. Just before the neo-Gothic King's College building, turn into Kerry Street towards the rear of the Royal Courts of Justice. Pass a couple of ancient parish boundary stones, then the 17th century Seven Stars Public House, before turning into Searle Street, where a statue of Thomas More occupies a niche on the corner. The precincts of Lincoln's Inn to the right can be visited most weekdays, and a variety of guided tours are available. Lincoln's Inn Fields to the left, now Pleasant Square, was once a place of execution. To the south, the macabre Hunterian Museum attracts its fair share of inquisitive visitors, while to the north, Sir John Soane's Museum is especially popular on the occasional evenings when illuminated by candlelight. Before leaving via Sardinia Street, stroll a few metres along nearby Portsmouth Street, where the old curiosity shop is surrounded by the more modern buildings of the London School of Economics. At the end of busy Kingsway, bear right past Bush House, former home of the BBC's World Service, then just before the Waldorf Hilton Hotel, enter Drury Lane. Opposite Sir Astro, the flamboyant theatre-themed restaurant, head alongside the Theatre Royal towards Covent Garden, a mecca for tourists and Londoners alike, where with St Paul's Church as a backdrop, popular entertainers entertain throughout the day. Finally, leave via King Street then New Row towards Leicester Square, where the majority of Britain's film premieres take place. It's also a good place to buy discounted theatre tickets. From here, visit nearby Chinatown, centred around Lille and Gerrard Streets, which is well stocked with restaurants and other shops. Then head along Coventry Street to Piccadilly Circus, with its famous aluminium statue of Eros flying high above tiers of improvised seating. Look left when crossing into Piccadilly to see the Duke of York column, the same Duke who once commanded 10,000 men. First stop in Piccadilly is St James's Church, which holds a well-established outdoor market most days. The tranquil gardens and cafe alongside attract those seeking a quiet place to relax. Further along, it's said that the Queen has visited Fortnum and Mason on more than one occasion to take afternoon tea. Try to be there at the top of the hour when the clock outside creates a novel diversion. Just beyond the Royal Academy of Arts opposite, where the vast majority of exhibitions attract excellent reviews, the Burlington Arcade, which dates from the early 19th century, is an attractive and extremely upmarket collection of retail outlets. Next is Old Bond Street, which becomes New Bond Street as it makes its way towards Oxford Street, a shopper's paradise. Unless on a mission to shop till you drop, cut through the Royal Arcade to Albemarle Street, where exceptionally luxurious Brown's Hotel is well patronised by an affluent clientele keen on discreet anonymity. Heading back across Piccadilly into St James's Street, glance right to see the less anonymous Ritz. Even for those with an aversion to shopping, St James's Street is worthy of tenuous interest at the very least. Davidoff Dunhill and James J. Fox, where Churchill was a customer, are all specialist cigar shops. D.R. Harris, chemist and perfumer, established in 1790 and with connections to the royal family, may just be the place to buy a present with a difference. John Robb is bespoke shoemaker to the royals. The world's oldest hat shop, James & Hock & Co., is where the famous bowler hat originated. At the bottom of the hill, Berry Brothers and Rudd have traded from their premises since 1698 and been associated with the royal family since the reign of King George III. The passage alongside leads to Pickering Place, the smaller square in London, where the Texan Embassy was once located, where Lord Palmerston, twice Prime Minister, resided, and where the last duel in London took place. Opposite St James's Palace was the official residence of the Kings and Queens of England until they decided to relocate to Buckingham Palace, which is just a short coach ride away. Take the road to the side past Queen's Chapel, built for Henrietta Maria, wife of King Charles I, then the Alexandra Memorial, before crossing the Mall into St James's Park to experience the views from the bridge. Continue along the path and over Birdcage Walk to Queen Anne's Gate. Turn left towards Queen Anne's statue, originally destined for the top of a column near St Mary le Strand Church, but eventually positioned here instead. Many of the nearby houses reflect the architecture of her era. Keystones and other ornamentation made from hard-wearing ceramic codestone remain in good condition to this day. Walk by Cockpit Steps, formerly part of an exclusive cockfighting venue, into Old Queen Street, home to some of London's oldest buildings. Go right at the end, passing Central Methodist Hall, which hosted the United Nations' first ever meeting, before crossing into Great Smith Street. After Westminster Abbey Choir School and the headquarters of the Church of England, turn first left then left again towards the gated entry of Dean's Yard. Follow the road before entering Barton Street, where Sir John Gielgud and Lawrence of Arabia once lived. At the end of Lord North Street, St John Smith Square was a church until bombed in 1941. It was eventually restored as a concert hall with a restaurant down in the crypt more than a quarter of a century later. Turn left towards Victoria Tower Gardens, with views of Lambeth Palace and St Thomas's Hospital across the river. Walk along the riverside path to Lambeth Bridge. The building just beyond, Thames House, is rumoured to be occupied by the Secret Service, but only rumoured. Then less discreet, the 118-metre high Millbank Tower offers excellent views over London for those able to afford it. A little further on, free guided tours are offered most days at the Tate Britain, one of London's leading art galleries, which was named after a manufacturer of sugar cubes. Cross Lambeth Bridge towards the Tudor bricked entrance of Lambeth Palace, official residence of the Archbishop of Canterbury, head of the Church of England. William Bligh, captain of the Bounty until his crew mutinied, is buried next door at St Mary at Lambeth Church, which has been converted into a garden museum. The restaurant there is said to be popular with people who work and live nearby. The detour to the Imperial War Museum involves a 10-minute stroll along the road running past the church away from the river. This walk continues along the riverside path to Westminster Bridge, passing St Thomas's Hospital, provider of healthcare since the 12th century and home to a museum dedicated to Florence Nightingale, the founder of modern nursing. Over the water it's impossible to miss the Houses of Parliament, rebuilt in the Gothic style after a fire in 1834. The Lion on Westminster Bridge comes from the Lion Brewery, demolished in 1949 and subsequently replaced by the Royal Festival Hall. First building along the south bank is County Hall, once headquarters of the Greater London Council. Much of it is now given over to entertainment, where crowds flock to visit the London Sea Life Aquarium and London Dungeon. Riverside, London Eye, formerly the city's highest viewing point, rotates about once every 30 minutes. At ground level, the Ministry of Defence and Whitehall Court buildings dominate the far bank. After Hungerford Bridge, which carries trains into nearby Charing Cross station, entertainment becomes arguably more sophisticated in the form of the Royal Festival Hall, Queen Elizabeth Hall and Purcell Room. Their brutalist architectural style was often preferred by governmental bodies because of lower construction costs. Opposite Cleopatra's Needle fronts Charnec's house and the Savoy, the first hotel to install electric lifts. Detour onto Waterloo Bridge, where views of the city are reckoned to be the best from ground level, before continuing past the National Theatre and London Television Centre, where many of the company's programmes are produced. Just round the corner, food outlets and shops line Gabriel's Wharf, the most significant for owners of tired feet being the London Bicycle Tour Company, which has an impressively large selection of bikes for hire. A little further on, the Oxide Tower was designed with windows forming the logo of a company product to circumvent local laws forbidding illuminated skyline advertising. After thoughtfully named Sea Containers House, take a steps by the Doggett Coat and Badge pub, named after the world's oldest rowing race, onto Blackfriars Bridge. Running parallel, Blackfriars Station also spans the river. From Blackfriars Station, head along Victoria Embankment towards Westminster. Until well into the 19th century, many properties along this section of the river had gardens leading down to the water's edge. It was decided, however, that a road with a railway beneath would better serve the city, so work commenced to produce what we have today. Shortly after Unilever House, the statue of a man between the old City of London School and Sion College buildings is called Taxi. Originally hailing from Park Avenue, New York, it was transferred to London in 2014. It's from this side of the river that the Oxide Tower's window design, in the form of an advertising logo, can be fully appreciated. About 100 metres further along, it's possible to discreetly enter the grounds of the Inner and Middle Temples, where most buildings house offices of legal professionals. The church there, which dates from the 12th century and featured in the Da Vinci Code movie, is usually open to visitors. Leave the embankment at the next junction, following the road as it bears left past 2 Temple Place, built for the Astor family in 1895, and now an art gallery which opens to the public when hosting exhibitions. A cabman's shelter, one of many built in the 1860s to provide food and drink for horse-drawn hansom cab drivers, is situated just beyond the entrance to Temple Station. Returning to the riverside, past the arch facade of Somerset House, once the site of the Tudor Palace. The pier by Waterloo Bridge, constantly manned by Royal National Lifeboat Institute volunteers, faces the London Television Centre and National Theatre across the river. Continuing under the bridge, the Queen Elizabeth Hall and Royal Festival Hall then come into view. Standing at the water's edge between 2 admiring sphinxes, Cleopatra's Needle, quarried in 1450 BC, was after a delay presented to the UK by the ruler of Egypt in 1819. Slightly inland, the Savoy Hotel and Shalmack's House provide a backdrop to the statues of pleasant Victoria Embankment gardens. Adjacent to Hungerford Bridge, which is flanked by the more recent pedestrian Golden Jubilee bridges, the Embankment Riverbus Pier is within walking distance of both the Embankment Underground Station and Charing Cross Mainline Station. The gardens continue along the front of Whitehall Court and Ministry of Defence buildings until reaching the famous rotating sign outside New Scotland Yard, headquarters of the Metropolitan Police. By Westminster Pier, the statue of Queen Boudica, whose army once burned London to the ground, faces the Houses of Parliament. Turn away from the river, where a narrow and often crowded Tesco Express store is an enticement for anybody in need of reasonably priced refreshment. Straight on, beyond Whitehall and Parliament Square, nearby St James's Park, at least in fine weather, is a popular venue for picnic lunches. Continue towards Buckingham Palace past Wellington Barracks, where the changing of the guard ceremony commences. Bearing right past the facade of the palace, walk a short distance along the Mall to the edge of Green Park, then follow the footpath leading beside Lancaster House and later Spencer House, which is owned by the family of Diana, former Princess of Wales. At the end, Green Park Underground Station is the nearest to Buckingham Palace. From Green Park Station, walk along Piccadilly with Green Park to the left. Across the road, Clarges Street is home to the Kennel Club. The Devonshire Gates, now incorporated into the boundary fence of the park, were once the entrance to the Duke of Devonshire's residence, demolished soon after the First World War. Whitehorse Street opposite follows the course of the now underground Tyburn River. At the end, just past the Mayor's, a popular specialist tobacco and wine merchant with a touch of class, enter secluded Shepherd Market, home to some rather nice restaurants, Victorian pubs and boutique shops. Continue through to Curzon Street, where Haywood Hill is one of London's leading bookshops. Next door, Trumpers, an equally famous gentleman's hairdresser and perfumer, is another shop which offers the opportunity to buy a present with a difference. Follow the road to Berkeley Square, where a Nightingale once sung, and where Annabella's exclusive nightclub is situated next door to the one-time residence of Clive of India. Turn into Hill Street, then right into Farm Street, passing the Church of the Immaculate Conception and almost certainly a Rolls Royce or two. By Thomas Good's China Shop, a specialist in luxury, holder of 2 royal warrants and undoubtedly proud of its long-standing association with the royal family, turn towards the Grosvenor Chapel, which was the model for many churches built in New England. It was attended regularly by future US President Dwight Eisenhower during his wartime stay in London. Past James Purdy and Son, a shop specialising in country pursuits, on the way to Grosvenor Square, home to the American Embassy, with statues of Presidents Reagan, Roosevelt and, as could be expected, Eisenhower in attendance. After the Embassy, take up a Brook Street in the direction of the trees in Hyde Park. At the end, turn by the showroom of car manufacturer Aston Martin, where looking in the window is allowed and free, towards Marble Arch, now marooned on a traffic island, but in grander times the entrance to Buckingham Palace. Over at Hyde Park, follow one of the diagonal paths towards the centre. On reaching the Serpentine, walk along the water's edge to the bridge, where the road over passes a couple of art galleries, then the Princess Diana Memorial Fountain. After Rotten Row, the tennis courts and Coalbrookdale Gates, exit right. Opposite, the statue of famous explorer David Livingstone is recessed in the wall of the Royal Geographical Society building. Follow the perimeter of the park towards the Albert Memorial, which faces the Royal Albert Hall, one of London's leading concert venues. Walk round to the far side of the building, past the second less well-known statue of Prince Albert, then down the steps towards the Royal College of Music. Head left then right into Exhibition Road, where it's possible to undertake a self-guided tour of Imperial College London, one of the very best universities in the world. Further along, both the Science Museum and Natural History Museum are free to enter and extremely popular. Then to experience relaxation within a work of art, visit the cafe of the Victoria and Albert Museum, just over the road and around the corner. From the V&A, continue past the busy Cabin Shelter to the London Oratory, a significant place of prayer with an opulent interior where respectful visitors are welcome. During the Cold War, it was used as a dead letter box by the KGB. About 250 metres further on, taking a peek inside Harrods will confirm it's more than just another department store. Across the junction by Knightsbridge Station, opposite Harvey Nichols, another highly regarded department store, McLaren sells cars and Rolex watches. Next door, the Mandarin Oriental Hotel, which overlooks Hyde Park, offers 5-star luxury. Past the French Embassy, less luxurious but also overlooking Hyde Park, before turning into Wilton Place, home to the Berkeley Hotel and St Paul's Church, which once counted the Duke of Wellington among its congregation. Enter left into Wilton Crescent. Beyond the Embassy of Luxembourg, follow narrow Wilton Road towards the secluded yet popular Grenadier Pub, where the gate to the side leads to Old Barrack Yard. Under the arch at the end, follow the road as it bears round towards Knightsbridge, then head in the direction of Park Lane's Hilton Hotel to Hyde Park Corner. Column-fronted Apsley House, once the home of the Duke of Wellington, is now a museum and art gallery, many exhibits having been acquired as a result of his wartime exploits. The large roundabout, once part of Green Park, is home to a number of military statues and memorials, most notably the Wellington Arch and equestrian statue. Finally, the third exit leads down Constitution Hill to the entrance of Buckingham Palace.